It's a great question. I mean, if you think about it, no organization, every company is just a shell. It's the people inside of the company that really animate the organization. And so culture is, everything that culture is the organization, if you will. And so I think, this goes back to what I just said a moment ago. One of the best ways to address that is, are you making it possible for the people inside of your organization to grow and develop? And as a manager, what does that look like? So at the bottom of the S curve, what do people need? They need a lot of support in the form of encouraging them, support in the form of feedback, in the form of valuing the fact that they're inexperienced and they're not blind by what's familiar. So they ask questions like, why do we do it like this? That open the door to innovation. Understanding that once people get into the sweet spot of that S curve, they need a lot of focus. The ability to say, okay, I know that I could ask you to do 20 different things. You need to focus on 3 things and achieving those 3 things. And remembering to say thank you to people who are really contributing in a meaningful way. And then at the high end of the curve, understanding and recognizing that you look at them and you think, well, they know exactly what they're doing. Let's just leave them be. But what they need, because they're starting to get bored, is some type of challenge. That challenge that either pushes them back and down into the sweet spot so that they stay engaged, or a challenge that invites them to jump to the bottom of a brand new S curve so that they can be back in that place where they don't know how to do things again and are very much going to figure out how to grow, because they don't want to stay there indefinitely, because it doesn't feel very good to not know what you're doing. It's a great question. So for me, my view of the world is that the fundamental unit of growth in any organization is the individual, that it always starts with, how do you make it possible for the individuals in your organization to grow and develop? And one of the frameworks that we developed is the S curve of learning framework, which basically says that every single person is on this S curve, and you start at the bottom where you don't know how to do things, you're inexperienced, and then you do this work to figure it out, and then you move into that sweet spot of the S curve where you know enough but not too much. And whereas at the low end you were kind of overwhelmed, maybe discouraged, now you're exhilarated because every time you do a lot happens. And then there's that top of the S curve where you've now become a master, but because you're no longer learning, you can get kind of bored, and it's important for you to be able to jump to the bottom of a new S curve. So you've learned, now it's time for you to leap and repeat. And what we're finding is that every organization that understands that people are on an S curve, everyone's on an S curve, allowing them to take responsibility for their growth and development. And then as a manager, as an organization, making it possible for people, once they've learned to leap, to making it possible for people to disrupt themselves, then you've got this vast engine of growth, because every single person in the organization focusing on growth and development, by definition, the organization will now become a high growth organization as well. Okay, so automation and AI, well, it's obviously been happening for a very long time, right? This idea of automation, it started with Henry Ford and the automobile, et cetera. So it's in place. We see it in things like interviewing, companies like HireVue, where you go on the video and they're able to go through very quickly, are we going to bring this person for a second round of interviews? We're seeing augmented reality that allows people to do training. So what I would say is, it's already in place, it's already happening. And in many ways, well, actually, sort of in almost every way, it's a good thing, because it augments our capacity. So from a workforce standpoint, what are the implications of it? It just means that we need to continue to get better at the things that only humans can do. And so part of the reason the work that we do is not only this S-curve of learning, but also this framework of personal disruption. We talk about disruptive products and services and companies and countries, but we as people need to know how to disrupt ourselves. We need to know how to do things like take the right risks to play where no one else is playing. We need to know how to do things like battling our sense of entitlement and this, people need to teach me how to do it. No, I need to go figure it out. And so what I would say is that as AI advances, this creates all sorts of opportunity. There's always opposition in all things. And so AI advances, that means there's an opportunity for us as human beings to advance in a very significant way. And so the question is we can be disrupted by AR, or we can choose to disrupt ourselves and harness the power of AR and AI and technology to do even more fantastic and exciting things than we've already done. More and more, it's not about structuring for millennials, because millennials are the workforce. It's within the next 5 years, it's going to be how are you as a millennial going to structure the workforce for Xers and Boomers? What I will say, having said that as an opening statement, is that millennials are very comfortable with on-demand. We are in an on-demand world. I want to watch a show on television. I want to watch a show on my computer, on my phone. Boom, it's there. I have a question, I go onto Google. I want to learn how to do something new, I go to YouTube. It's on demand. And so I think for a millennial, there's this question of, okay, if I can't get the opportunity that I want at this company, then I will go to another organization on demand. And so I think this notion that we need to create an environment where the people that are working for us and with us can learn, have the opportunity to learn, leap, and repeat, to grow and develop, to manage their own S-curve becomes ever more important, especially in an environment where unemployment is so very low. And so to answer your question, how do we structure the work experience? We find that sweet spot between getting whatever needs to get done and making it possible for people to learn on the job, to be able to have their why intersect with the why of the organization as much as possible. That is a great question. And so here's what we do in our organization, because everybody wants to work, everybody wants to learn and develop. But what we always do before we hire someone or really look to engage with someone at a very deep level, like for example, we hired a fractional CFO to work with us and to, run our books and basically be our CFO and run the finances. But before they did it, I had them read the books that we had written. And so are these people who believe in the fundamental mission? They believe in the why of your organization, because they may be a very good CFO, but if they don't believe in what you're doing and what you as an organization are trying to accomplish, you're never going to get that extra something, because they haven't bought into the mission. And so what I would recommend every organization does before you hire someone is, in my case, I can say read the book, but some form of that is to get a sense of, for example, if it's a company, I was talking to a company not too long ago called Traeger Grills. They build these grills. Well, if you're going to actually engage with people and work with them, do they have a Traeger grill? Do they like to grill, right? Are they excited about the outdoor life and being able to do that? If they're not, then it may not be the best person for you to engage with, because they're not excited about your services. So I think that's really the first place to start, because once you know that they're bought into the mission of the organization, then you can pull their different skills and they will do their absolute best work on your behalf and the organization's behalf. Yeah, so I think this comes back to the S-curve. I'm always going to bring you back to the S-curves. So I think what you want to do is, all right, so let's say you've got a team. a team of 10 people. The way that you organize that upskilling is you start with something like our S-curve locator that tells people where is this person on the S-curve in this particular role, in terms of the skills that they need, in terms of being able to, well, let's just start with the skills. Where are they? And so the way that you upskill them is say, okay, if this person's at the low end of the S-curve, what do they need in order to get to the high end of the S-curve? So as opposed to just starting at a very sort of macro level of what does everybody in this organization need, there are going to be some basic human skills that people need, like they need to be good listeners, they need to be able to give good feedback. But from a skills, from a functional perspective, you want to figure out what does the job require, where are they relative to that, are they at the low, middle, or high end of the S-curve, and then what skills do they need in order to get sort of build momentum, coaching them to the curve. And as their manager, you don't necessarily need to be the person who's teaching them how to do it. You just need to facilitate that. You will be able to assess that, but you also want to make sure that they're saying, here's what I need. Here's what I need in order to be successful. So the upskilling starts with the S-curve, where are people, and then coaching to that curve and being very individual in terms of helping them get the skills that they need to get to the top of that S-curve, or in some cases, jump to the bottom of a new one. A few things. Number one, start with yourself. Recognize that you've got to take responsibility for your own career, your own development, figuring out how to play to your strengths, figuring out how to embrace your constraints. You are on this S-curve of learning, and the number one person who has responsibility for moving up that S-curve is you. So that's where I would start. Now, in an environment that's increasingly disruptive, which we know it is, like the pace of change right now is as slow as it will ever be, there are a couple of things to be aware of. If you're in an industry in your career that happens to be very volatile, well, actually they're all volatile, but if the volatility is coming from outside of your industry, the thing that you want to do is you want to get ahead of it. So you want to be very good at having this skill that when you get to a top of a learning curve, you are prepared to jump to the bottom of a new one. You don't stay there for a long time and coast and say, I deserve to be here, I'm just going to stay here, or I'm afraid and I'm just going to stay here. You have to cultivate that ability of, I'm at the top, it's time to jump. The other thing that you can do when that volatility is coming or that disruption is coming outside of your industry is figure out what skills do you have that are transferable to other industries, so that you're not just focused on the industry that you're in. So, some skills, it's very easy. If you're in finance, you can do that across industries, but how do you find a way to make the skills that you have transferable across industries? Human skills, by the way, are transferable across industries. For those of you who are in an industry where there's a lot of volatility in the industry, for example, the software industry, again, you stay ahead of the curve, and if you're smart and jumping at appropriate times, then you can actually, that behooves you, because it becomes more profitable for you, because your talent and your ability is always going to be in demand. The one caveat I would say is, in these industries that tend to be very hot, lots of demand, just be aware that there's always the risk that if you start to move up the S-curve, someone hires you, you jump to the bottom of a new S-curve, and so you start to arrest your development. So move up that S-curve. When you've got lots of opportunities, don't jump too soon, because in that growth that you want to see, that cycle that you want to see play out, doesn't get a chance to. And at some point in your career, you find, oh dear, I've jumped so many times, I actually don't know anything, because I kept getting to up and I jumped. I moved up and jumped. So volatility outside of your industry, get ahead of it, have that skill of jumping to new curves, broaden your skills so that you can work across industries. Same holds true for the volatility within your industry, but then you've got this extra opportunity of, if you manage it properly, you can do that financially, and it can be very profitable. But again, don't jump too quickly. I would say one is that I'm the oldest of 4 children, so I think there's that sense of responsibility that comes with being the oldest child. probably tend to be more serious. At least I am. I think that's definitely one thing that's influenced me in who I am and how I behave as a business leader. I think another one is that my parents, my mother had always worked. My parents divorced when I was 17. My mother always worked. And so I really, in my mind, in retrospect, there was never this thought that I wouldn't work and have a career. And so I think that's definitely influenced me. And also just seeing the discrimination that she experienced in the workplace. Like when my brother, my youngest sibling, was born, she basically had to quit teaching school because you couldn't be pregnant and have a baby. And so there's always been this sense of like, I want to right some of these wrongs and have been able to just by pursuing a career. And I think the third thing that's influenced me as a leader is that I always studied piano. I actually majored in music in college. And when I was in college, I was studying or practicing piano 3 hours a day, every morning from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. And so I think that discipline of being a musician and practicing my craft every day definitely influences my work ethic and the discipline that I have around the business that I'm building. Okay, yeah. So what I would say is that, leaders lead and bosses drive. And so what you as a leader can do is you're creating the ecosystem where that growth becomes possible. You're the person who recognizes and acknowledges that every person that you work with, that works for you or alongside you, is on that S-curve of learning, being aware of it and giving them opportunities to grow. So for example, if you've got a senior technology leader, this happened with one of my clients, who super capable, and he was like, you know what, I've got this person on my team and he's not quite doing the work that he was doing. What's going on? Well, they had the conversation and he found it. He's at the top of his S-curve. And what happens when you get to the top? You start to get bored. And so you start to kind of pull back. So he had the conversation, didn't fire him. He said, how do we make it so that you can continue to learn and continue to grow? Do you need to go do something new? Or do we need to give you some challenging assignments within that role so that you can continue to develop? So you create the environment wherein people can develop. Yes, you've got to get things done. You've got sales to make and products that you need to deliver, but there's a lot of latitude within that for people to grow and develop by simply just being aware of what it is they're trying to accomplish. And again, going back to that idea of how do you, as much as possible, have the why of your organization, your why as a manager, intersect with the why of the people that work for you, and then facilitate that development.